that being said, let's look at what are the top traits that women find irresistible in men. I've got a list of 10 of them here. We're going to go through them in no particular order. And then, if we've got time, we're going to be looking at some actual examples of talking to girls in real life and breaking those down, because I think it's really important to show some sort of tangible kind of examples of this stuff. So hold on to your hats for that, gentlemen and ladies. But in the meantime, let's go through this list. So 10 irresistible traits, 10 masculine traits that women find irresistible in men. Number one is basically summed up by the word dominance, okay? Now, there are different strands to this, and you can take this in various different directions, but as an overarching theme, what do women really like? Well, they like guys that they feel are dominant in some way, okay? And that can include things like the ability to make decisions, okay? The ability to lead. A classic example of this is when you're proposing a date. You're talking to the girl, you're saying, hey, let's meet for a date. And then she says, yeah, cool. And then you say, okay, so what would you like to do? Or where would you like to go? You know, or what restaurant should we go to, or what bar should we go to, right? You're asking her. You're immediately deferring the decision to her, okay? And that's an incredibly bad thing to do, because and I've heard women that I'm friends with and that I know and that I've dated complaining about this stuff, right, when guys have done it. And the reason is because what they want is a guy who comes in and who makes that decision for them, right? They don't want a guy who is not able to have an agenda, have an idea, have a vision, and then push through with that vision, okay? She wants to be taken along for the ride. She doesn't want some wishy-washy kind of buffoon who is looking to her to lead, okay? Because what we need to bear in mind with all of this stuff, right, is masculine, feminine polarity. There has to be masculine to feminine polarity, okay? We need to emphasize that at all times. And if that isn't being emphasized in the interaction, then you're going to be on the losing side of the battle, particularly in the West, at a time when, let's face it, women are becoming somewhat more masculinized, if you want to put it like that, okay? Women obviously have their own careers, they have jobs, they're boss babes, they're going out there, they're earning money and stuff like that. They are becoming much more, we're not in a society where the women are all sweet and they're feminine and submissive and they're just going to say yes sir, no sir, and nod their heads to anything you say. Quite the opposite, right? Women can be very vicious, actually, socially. If you go and chat up a hot girl at the club and she doesn't like you, you're going to find out pretty quickly that she's not going to give you very short shrift, okay? So you need to really up your game as far as that polarity is concerned. And that means being that dominant guy. Now, it's not about being an arse who's just going around yelling at people and trying to bulldoze her into doing stuff that she doesn't want to do. It's not about that. You've got to take all of this stuff as nuance, right? All of this stuff is multi-layered and not straightforward, okay? But as an overarching thing, does she want you to be more dominant? Yes, absolutely she does, okay? Yes, you've got to be the guy with the plan. She's got to go along with the plan that you have. I mean, look, if you meet a woman and she's kind of amenable to you, and you say to her, oh, well, where do you think we should go? Yeah, she'll probably, she'll give you some suggestions. Maybe she'll suggest a place, whatever. But is she really going to respect that behavior? No, not really. You need to be the guy who's leading the fucking thing, okay? That's the important bit. JBB, he's admiring the shape of your skull. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the honor. Although, actually, my haircut, I take a bit of pride in the old haircut, so I guess it is quite good to showcase all of it, right? I think that is important. So dominance, okay. So if any of you guys are familiar with old school game material, old school sort of pickup material, a guy called Chateau Artiste, website called Chateau Artiste, the writer had a pseudonym called Royce, okay? Very, very, very good blog of old blog posts all about game, all about dating, all about the pickup arts and all of that kind of stuff. Fantastic stuff. He veered off into politics a little bit and went a bit nuts. So some of his political stuff is a little bit dodgy, let's say. But his dating stuff is very, very good. And he really, really specialized in distilling and writing about this dominance frame and how important It is, okay? And what I see, and we're going to go into some of the reasons why this might be the case, but what I tend to see with guys when we're coaching guys, and guys when I'm just out and about generally and looking at what's happening around me, a lot of guys in the West particularly are quite wishy-washy. You know, if you go around in London or you go around in New York, maybe Miami, less so Miami probably actually, but London, New York, you've got a lot of dudes who are pretty soy, okay? You know that term, soy? You know, you've got these dudes and they're wandering around and they're drinking their vegan lattes and they're carrying tote bags and they've got these like very carefully manicured beards, and there's something a little bit weedy about it all, right? There's something a little bit unmasculine about it, okay? Now, masculinity in itself, of course, is a wide spectrum, right? You've got the likes of some of the top internet figures over here. You've got the Jocko Willinks and people of that ilk, okay? Obviously, and then you've got the more, I guess I'm representing a slightly different sort of shade of it, let's say. But you want to be on the side of the curve that lends itself to a higher degree of masculinity, basically, okay? You want to be more forceful. You want to be more dominant as a personality. If you don't have those things, then, you know, yeah, you might end up dating somebody who's going to walk all over you, but it's not going to be a very fun experience. And Mystery of the Mystery Method, who was featured, of course, in the book The Game by Neil Strauss in 2005, famously said that ultimate masculine attracts ultimate feminine, okay? So you want the ultimately feminine, submissive, beautiful, young woman, okay? She's going to be attracted to the more masculine dude, okay? Polarity, super, super important. We opposites attract. We are attracted to that thing which is different in nature to us, okay? So you need to emphasize your masculinity, which sounds kind of cringe, but it's true, right? That's what needs to come across. It doesn't have to be in a 2D alpha way. You don't have to go around doing an Andrew Tate impression the whole time, okay? It's not about that, but you do need to emphasize the difference between you and her. And I've talked about the West, but if you go east, if you go to Eastern Europe, you go to Poland or even into Ukraine prior to the war, or Russia itself, where the women are very much more feminine and somewhat more submissive, and although, you know, feminism is taking hold in those parts of the world as well, nevertheless, there is a more traditional sort of backdrop there. Those women like dominant guys even more, okay? They expect it, all right? And if you're not living up to that, then she's just going to think, well, who the hell is this idiot? You know, this soy latte drinking, you know, metropolitan London buffoon. And she's not going to give a monkey's right about you, because you've got to emanate that raw masculinity that she craves, okay? The Raging Tomato is back with some tomatoes and some hearts. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in yesterday for the Brittany Venti thing. Okay, so number 2 goes on from that really, but it's the ability to say no. Okay, the ability to say no, and this is, you could say dominance, but this is really something slightly different, which is pushing back. Okay, pushing back on her, her agenda, what she wants. Now, again, this is not to say you're being a complete arse the entire time, and whatever she says, oh, I'd love some ice cream. You're like, no, shut up. Oh, I'd love to have a cold drink. No, it's not like that. It's not like just saying no to everything for the sake of things, but you have to have boundaries. Okay, and Pearl hates the term boundaries, and I know why, because it is kind of cringe, but hear me out, because in this context, what you need to do is have an idea of, okay, what is tolerable for me? What is acceptable for me in my universe? What am I going to allow in terms of this relationship? And things that you will not allow that are beyond the pale as far as you are concerned for that relationship with this girl, okay? And you've got to just you've got to hold to those boundaries, okay? So if it is, and this is one that gets talked about a lot on all of these shows, all of these red pill shows, but if it is something like going to the club, and for you, it's unacceptable that she goes to the club on the Friday night, for example, you've got to lay down the law. You've got to put down that boundary, okay? Obviously, it's up to you beforehand to decide where you stand on stuff like that. But if she's trying to get you to do things that you don't want to do, like if she's saying to you, okay, it's Saturday, let's go and visit my friend. You know, my friends are doing this performance. Why don't we go to it? It's going to be amazing, blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking, I really don't want to go to that thing. I don't like her friends don't like me. I've got work to do. I want to focus on my mission, the stuff that I need to be getting done for myself. You've got to hold that boundary. You've got to be prepared to say no to her, okay? Or if she proposes some really stupid thing, which women will do from time to time, you know, so, oh, well, let's just book this crazy trip, or let's do this crazy thing, or, you know, you've got to be up at 4 a.m. to catch a flight, and she's like, oh, why don't we just go for a late drink or something, and you don't want to. You've got to be prepared to say no. You've got to be prepared to have boundaries and to stick to them, okay, even if it's going against what she wants. Again, this is not to be nasty. This is not to be unkind to her, but this is because otherwise she would see you as somebody who is very malleable, okay, that she's able to push around and she's able to control. And unfortunately, what tends to happen in relationships over time is death by a thousand cuts, basically. Death by a thousand concessions, right? You start to concede on this point, you start to concede on that point, you concede on the third point, and then all of a sudden, she's lost respect for you, she's walking all over you, she's doing what she wants, and you are crumpled up in the corner like a buffoon, crying your eyes out, okay? That is not where you want to end up, right? You need to have boundaries and you need to establish them early on, and you need to show that you're prepared to enforce them as well, okay? And all of this stuff really goes back even to the initial encounter. So the first approach, the first time you guys meet, you want to present as the kind of guy who has standards, who has boundaries, okay? Who is not going to put up with just any old shit. All right. Now, that doesn't mean being a humorless bore who's tutting and shaking his head at everything and just saying no to her the whole time. It's not about that. You can still be the fun guy. You can still be charismatic. You can still be charming. You can be humorous, witty, whatever, right? And you should be those things. But underlying all of that, there needs to be that steel. There needs to be that sense of, I'm not going to take this shit going beyond this point, okay? She needs to be aware of that. This is something that I personally got better at as I got older, okay? When I was younger and I was having my first sort of relationships, my first girlfriends, I was very, very bad with this stuff. Basically, I was just so glad that a girl wanted to spend time with me that I would kind of just do whatever she wanted to do. I'd let everything go. And very quickly, I found those women lost respect for me. And inevitably, those relationships ended up falling apart, okay? Much later, when you sort of just get tired of all that bullshit, right? I mean, by and large now, the women that I deal with, they kind of just know it. I don't have to say anything. They kind of just know that there are certain boundaries in place, that there are certain things that I would not tolerate, and I would just walk away, right? And by and large, they tend to fall in line with that, okay? And it's not about me being this draconian dictator. It's just about the vibe that I'm emanating, what I'm giving out, if that makes sense. Right, if you're like, you know, if you're getting on a bit, like me, right, you know, late 40s, and you're dating these women who are in their 20s, there does come a point. I mean, look, I think I'm pretty young at heart, right? You know, I still go to the club sometimes. I was in the club in Miami last year. You know, I like to go out. I'm pretty social. I can stay up late, all that kind of stuff. But really, it does get to a point where, you know, it's kind of like I can take or leave all that stuff. You know, I am quite happy just to go home and have a nice cup of tea and put the radio on, right? And there does start to become a bit of a gulf, because you're dealing with these ladies who are somewhat younger than you, and they just have more energy and they're just more up for that kind of bullshit, you know. And it's like, oh, we can go to this other place, ha ha ha, blah blah blah. And sometimes you have to gently but firmly, you have to sort of push back on that and be like, no, listen, I think let's go back now, let's go and chill. And frequently they're just going to fall into line with that, okay? Like I was recently I was dealing with one lady, and you know, she was kind of, and the other thing for me as well, because I stopped drinking, right? So I don't drink anymore. I haven't drunk for a long time. And that obviously comes into it as well, because if I'm dating a girl and, you know, she likes to drink, she likes to party, there's going to be a part of her that's going to want to do those things. But there's also going to be another part of her that is like, okay, well, he doesn't. And if that's going to be a big problem for her, if she's going to be like, well, Troy's boring, I want to go out and rage until 6 a.m., then really, even for a casual thing, we're just not suited, because it's just not going to work, you know. But for the most part, what happens is they kind of understand. I tell them where I'm coming from. They're kind of like, okay, right, yeah, I get it. And they are happy when they're with me, just to be a little bit more chilled. It's not that we're not going to go out. It's not that we're not going to stay out, but we're just not going to be out until 7 in the morning. Although, actually, I was actually in Miami. We were out until about 6 a.m. at this Latin club. That was quite cool. But, you know, for the most part, I'm going to be knocking it on the head by about 1 a.m., 1 a.m., maybe 2 a.m. at the latest, right? And that's on even on a big night, okay? So I'm not going to be accompanying her on those crazy things. She can do this with her friends. She can do that in her spare time. I don't care. When she's with me, that's not what we're going to be doing. It's not that we're going to be going home and knitting socks, right? You know, we can still have a good time, but she has to understand there's limitations on what I want to do. Otherwise, there's no point in us hanging out, really, because it's just not going to be enjoyable. And actually, I did date a girl back about a year ago now in London, and she was, I think, 24 or something like that, and she was very full of beans, let's say. She liked to stay up late, she liked to party, she liked to do all kinds of things, and it was a little bit, you know, I'm just kind of like, listen, darling, I kind of need to get a bit of sleep now, you know? So that can become a conflict, and as I say, you don't just want to blindly just go along with what someone wants to do just because you think they're sexy, right?